Would you like to know how you can start seeds for your garden the easy way? Well, today I'm going to show you something called winter sowing. It's Jody with All About the Harvest, where I teach you how to grow, use, and preserve your harvest. And today I am going to be teaching you all about winter sowing. I did a video on this a couple years ago, and since then I have learned a lot more, and I want to share some additional tips and tricks and some best practices when it comes to winter sowing. So you might be wondering, what is winter sowing? Winter sowing is when you are placing seeds in containers and putting them outside during the winter. Now, I live in Wisconsin, and that means I am going to be placing these outside in the snow. We literally just had a blizzard days ago. It was snowing this morning. There were plows going through, and our patio is covered in snow, and I will actually be putting these containers in the snow. Now, what will happen is these plants will self-start when spring comes on their own. They will just do it naturally. The beauty of winter sowing is there is no heating pads, there are no grow lights, there is no having to look after these seeds. They just start on their own when nature tells them to. And the other nice thing is it doesn't necessarily matter when you start them. So last year I started some in February, in March, in April, and in May. And it didn't matter when I put them outside because they all started growing when it was their time. So if you feel like, oh, I might not be able to do this because it's already March or April, have no fear. Today is February 25th, and I am starting this project today. So I mentioned last year I did some in February, March, April, and May. I planted some May 7th last year. Now I'm in Wisconsin Zone 5, so it does get pretty cold here, but this should work regardless of where you live. So let me tell you about the first thing that you'll need, and these are going to be containers. You're going to need some sort of container to put your potting soil in and your seeds in. So in the past, I have tried 2-liter bottles, I have done milk jugs or water jugs, and I've also done juice containers. Here is an example of a juice container. Here is an example of a water jug. This is actually distilled water, but milk jugs look the very same. So the things that you need to know about your containers. One, they need to be either clear or opaque, but you don't want to use one that is a solid color. So some of the milk jugs are completely white, and I don't believe that those would work. Now, you want to have a taller container. You don't want to have the short containers because these seeds are actually going to grow tall into this container. So you will need some head space for these plants to grow. And then the third thing that I would look for, and this is why I no longer use 2 liters, is that you want something that has a bigger base. So the milk jugs or the gallon jugs are really great. These would be my second option. The 2 liters end up tipping over, and I didn't like that, so I stopped doing them after my first year. Last year, I decided to use just the juice or the milk and water jugs, the gallon containers. I have also used vinegar jugs as well, and that works. Out of the 2 of these, my preferred one is the milk jug. And the reason is because it's actually bigger, and it has that bigger footprint at the bottom, which allows it to be more stable and less likely to tip over in the wind. Remember, you're going to be putting these outside, and so they are going to be subject to the elements. So I personally like these. With these, I have used them. They're a little bit harder to cut, which I'm going to talk about today. And they're also, when you take the duct tape off, they can be really difficult to get that duct tape off. So use these if you have them. Or if you just don't have enough jugs, then by all means use what you have. I this year will be using just the milk jugs or the 1 gallon containers. Your containers are the first thing that you need. and get as many as you want. Have your family and friends save them for you. That's what I did. I had my sister save her milk containers for me because her family goes through a lot of milk, and so they were saving those for me. And so this year I have quite a bit. Now here's a tip. If you do winter sowing, you can actually save your containers from last year and use them for this current year. And that's what I also am doing this year. That saves you for having to drill at the holes and cut them. Okay, so aside from your containers, you are going to need a Sharpie, a regular size and a fine tip. You are going to need obviously your seeds. You're going to need a pad of paper and a pen and a scissors and something that can cut your milk jug. So either, you know, a carpenter's knife or an X-Acto knife or a regular knife. You need something to put drainage holes in them. So what I use for that is I use a drill, and I use the 1/4-inch drill bit. That works really well. You could use a hot glue gun or a soldering gun, or you could use a scissors to put a hole in there or a knife to put a hole in there. But I personally find that just a drill and the drill bit work really, really well, and it's super, super easy, fast, and efficient. And I'll talk more about where you need to put those holes in a moment. So other things you're gonna need are something like popsicle sticks or wooden craft sticks. I use these when I am labeling inside of my container and just to have another way to label it. Now, another thing you'll definitely need is duct tape. You don't want to use packing tape. You definitely need to use duct tape. It adheres better, and so get some duct tape. This is optional, but I use a tape measure, and I use that because I am now pre-cutting my duct tape to about 23 inches. And that 23 inches is about the perfect size for being able to go all the way around a gallon milk jug. So you'll need a measuring tape. You also need potting soil. So you want to use a container mix, a potting soil. You do not want to use a seed starter mix because these seeds will be in here for longer than a seed starting mix can actually provide enough nutrients for. I just put my potting soil mix in. This is just a bucket. I put it in my bucket, and this is how I use to fill my containers. You'll also want to make sure that you can get that potting soil wet. You will need a spray bottle with water to mist it. And then I also have a boot tray, but something to kind of contain the mess. So that's just optional, but it works nice when you're filling these jugs because they have holes in the bottom, and so you can get soil all over, and so something to put them in until you're ready to actually put them outside. Most of these things you should already have in your house, so you really shouldn't need to incur a lot of cost. Obviously, your seeds and your soil are likely going to be your biggest expenses. We talked about the tools and the things that you need to actually do this winter sowing. The containers are your main thing. That is what you need to be able to do winter sowing. So let's go into a little bit more into detail on those containers. So I already told you that milk jugs are the way that I go, and obviously I talked about the juice jugs. Now you can save these containers all year round, and what I do is, like I had mentioned earlier, I asked family to save their containers for me. I just made sure they were nice and dried, and then I store them with this top on because the top will actually help maintain the integrity of this container when we put holes in the container. So make sure that you're saving your containers. I keep them in a big plastic bag until I'm ready to use them. So on this particular gallon jug, I went ahead and showed you where I would be cutting and where I would be drilling. So in the beginning, I mark everything, but once you do this multiple times, you won't have to mark it because you'll just know. But what I always do is I start at the bottom first. So for a gallon container, I do 6 holes in the bottom. So I just mark them with the X. And if the bottom of the container has a groove, like the milk jug does here, or this is a distilled water, but I'll probably keep calling it a milk jug. So like this jug does, it has the groove, then I put 2 in there, and then I put 2 and 2. So I have 6 on the bottom of this. Now in something like this, you can put some inside the bottom of this raised portion, or if that's too difficult, because it is hard, this is a really hard plastic there, you could just do 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 on each of the basic corners there, and that will suffice just fine. Now, the other thing I do, you'll notice on the sides I have little X's, and these X's are also for drill holes. These are for drainage. So obviously the bottom is for drainage, and so is the side. So I do 1 on each side of the milk jug, and I do it, generally speaking, I do it right about 2 inches from the bottom. This might be up a little bit higher, but if you see on this, I do it kind of closer to the bottom. And on the bottom of depending on the bottom of a milk jug or in a water jug, there is this, like there's another seam right about 2 inches from the bottom, and that would be a great place to put it. You don't want to put the drill hole too high because the soil might not cover that hole. The whole point is to allow the soil to drain. So make sure you're putting it towards the bottom. And then also if you put it up too high, your duct tape might actually cover it. So I always drill the bottom holes first, then I drill the 4 sides. Again, on this one, I would do all 4 sides as well. And then I cut the opening in the jug. Now for a milk jug or a water jug, what I do is you can see on the back here, I have these lines that's telling me, okay, stop cutting. So basically I don't want to cut where the handle is because this is going to be my hinge point, okay? And I'll show you in this. So this is how it will look. It's a hinge point. So I don't actually cut that area, and you'll also see, and I'll talk about it in an upcoming portion of this video, is I actually label that area as well. That's why I don't cut that. And it's also, these containers can be reused next year. So if you're not cutting it completely open, then the container is all one piece, and then you can still use them again next year. So I stop, like I said, where the handle is, and then I just cut all the way around to that next part, and I can leave that area for a hinge point. And while I'm doing this, I leave the top on because that does help maintain some integrity of that milk carton, okay? And so after I do that, this is what it looks like. Now this one, I didn't draw on it, but I just manually did it while I was standing in the kitchen. And I got my 6 holes on the bottom, I got my 4 holes on the side, and then I did my cut and my hinge point. So if you do have labels on your container, it is a little bit more difficult to get through those labels, but you can obviously do that. And again, I just use a utility knife or a carpenter's knife. That's what I use for cutting these open, and then obviously I told you I use the drill. So that is for these particular containers. And you want, the end goal is to have 3 to 5 inches of soil in this. So obviously the higher up you can do it without, wrecking the integrity of your milk jug is the best. Now for a container like this, which is a juice container, so again, I would put those holes in the bottom. I would put the holes in the sides, again, about that 2 inches from the bottom. Now this is a little bit different because it doesn't have a handle. So what I do, I don't know if you can see where I kind of tried to outline with black marker, but this is about the level right where there's a nice groove that goes all the way around. This is the level that I would use to cut it, okay? And when I cut it, I would create my own hinge, and I would do that on a corner. So right here, there happened to be, like, this is where the label was stuck, and so that is where I would stop cutting, and that would be my hinge point. So you just wouldn't cut that 2 inches there. And so it's totally possible. I've done this before. I've done that in my first season. The video that I did, I will link up above, and then I'll also put it in the description below where you can see how I did the 2 liter, how I did this, and obviously the milk jugs as well. But for more information on that, you can check that video out. So now there's 2 different options. You can either cut your containers or you can label your containers. And now it depends on what you'd like to do. So I'm gonna explain it. So typically what I've always done is I just cut my containers first and then I label them. There's pros and cons to both. So cutting them right away, you can just go ahead and cut your containers. Like I said, you're gonna drill, you're gonna cut the side. You can do that at any time. There's no worry. So then you could have these all ready come, you know, the winter when you're ready to actually winter sow. Or you can do them all in the day that you're going to be winter sowing. It can make it a little bit longer. So that's one option. So the other option is you can label your container with what you're putting in it before you actually cut it. And so I labeled this because I wanted you to see where I label my container. And I've done this because sun will fade the container, and over time you might not be able to see this. So I do it in multiple locations, and I'm going to tell you where. So when I did my first video, I labeled what the plant was, the days to harvest, and now I label with just the name of the plant and a number, and that number refers to that plant. So last year, number 1 was short and sweet carrots. So I have a cheat sheet that I create each year with what number 1 is, and I put that on the sheet. That way, if for some reason the word, the name of it is faded out and I can't read it, I should be able to read the number, and then the number will correspond with this. So this is why you need a pen and paper. I had mentioned that earlier. This is also good because if I label this cucumber and I have 2 different kinds of cucumbers, I need to know which cucumber it is. Typically speaking, if I have 2 different kinds of something, say for example, tomato plants, I will put like the first letter of that particular tomato plant. So for example, I have 2 different kinds of onions that I will be doing this year. And this one is a Bermuda onion. So I put B onion on this. And this one is going to be jug number 33. So I put number 33 on the back. And if you notice where it is on the back, this is where I'm not cutting, and I'm actually going to be putting the duct tape over it, so this will also protect it from the sun. I do write what it is on the handle because it's just easy for me to see. I've also put the number under the handle, and then I put it on the top in the front. So I put the number and then the word. So I put the word on it at least twice, maybe 3 times, and I put the number on it 2 to 3 times on the outside of the container. Under here I wrote B onion because this is going to get covered with duct tape, so it's another way to protect it from the elements. As a fail-safe, the other thing I do is I write what it is on the popsicle sticks, and then I put that inside of the container itself. So you'll see that when we do the tomatoes. What you need next is soil. So again, I mentioned you need potting soil. Seed starting mix is not going to work. So you need potting soil, and you go ahead and make sure that that potting soil is moist. So I put it in a bucket like this. So I just put some water in there from my sink, and then I kind of mix it around to make sure that it is evenly wet throughout. So you don't want the soil dripping wet, but it should be moist enough that it can hold some water and your seeds aren't going to dry out. So after I do that, then what I do is I take my container and I fill it with that soil. So I already did this container. Now this was a container that I used last year and I resaved it. So that's why the top isn't on it. So with this, I went ahead and put my potting soil mix in. So then I picked what seeds that I wanted to put in this particular container. Now this one I used last year and I wanted to do it again. So this is beefsteak tomatoes, and last year this was my number 12 container. So I'm keeping it as number 12 for this year and for beefsteak. So I did my garden planning yesterday and figured out how many plants that I want in my garden of certain things. I read the seed packet and I said, okay, these need to be sown a 1/2 inch deep. So I created 1/2 inch little pockets in this potting soil, and then I put some tomato seeds in those little pockets. Now I tried to get 1 in each pocket, but sometimes I got 2 and I wasn't gonna sweat it. In this container, I made 6 wells. For this size, for the jug, for the gallon jug, 8 might be about as max as you can get. And so I did 6. And then now I'm going to go ahead and cover them up. So let me go ahead and just put some of that soil back over to cover them because I have enough that I can do that. If you didn't, then you just add some more from here. So now I just covered them up. So now you take your water, your spray bottle, and you mist it. You want to get it nice and wet. to make sure. That's really important, specifically if you're using a different, if you're using a dry mix, but you still want this nice and moist because this is going to be how these seeds last through this winter and spring. So now is when we use that popsicle stick, and I have labeled this as number 12, beef steak tomato. And I always put my popsicle stick where the hinge is. So I put it up against that hinge or right next to it, like that. So at this point, mine's already labeled because this was from last year, but if it wasn't, then I would label them. Again, remember I told you I label on the back of my container what the number is. And then also on here I had written beef steak already, and that stayed, and the beef steak tomato at the top here stayed. So mine actually looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to get the duct tape. Now let me explain a little bit about the duct tape. You need to use duct tape. You can't use packing tape. What I'm experimenting with this year is pre-cutting my duct tape. So that's where the tape measure comes in. So I measured around here, and it is about 22 inches. If I do a 23-inch piece of tape, it will get all the way around here and it will cover it. If you go less than the 22 inches, it might be a little bit short. If that happens, you just cut an additional piece. So I have pre-cut them, and what I did is I laid this tape measure out on my counter, and I cut a bunch of duct tape individually, one at a time, and I basically set them on my counter upside down so that I would be ready when I need them. Now, I didn't get them all at 23 inches, some were 24 or 25, but as long as they're about that length. In my first video, I told you how to put duct tape on. And in this video, I'm actually going to show you a different way to put your duct tape on, because now I cover this number at the back, and I actually want the duct tape to go around, like to cover itself. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, so here is my duct tape. This is about 23 inches exactly. And in the past, I had you start from the front of this and, put it on, like put half on and then come around and come behind it. But what I have learned is a better way to do it is by starting on the back, because we want to cover this number, right? So I start on the back, and because that is a solid portion, I'm gonna cover that first. So I'm just gonna do that, and I'm just gonna show you what that looks like. Hopefully you can see this. So I do it like that, and that gives it a good starting point. And then I come around, and this doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be covered. So as you can see, and I'm trying to do it away from me, so I apologize, but I want you to be able to see. I mean, it's not that hard. You're just putting tape on something, right? So, but it's harder when you're doing it for the camera, I guess. Okay, and there. Okay, so I just did it. So this was 23 inches, and it covered it by about an inch to 2 inches, which is okay. I want mine to overlap, and that's fine. So then when I need to take this off, I just pull it, and then I know that that number is still under there being protected from the sun. Okay, so the point of that is now this is a solid little greenhouse, basically. I take this off, and then I'm gonna put this outside. I'm actually gonna put it in a snowbank up against my house, and this will get everything that it needs. So now this is ready to go outside. Don't keep these tops on, because they need to be able to get the snow and the rain inside of these containers naturally. Now, speaking of rain and watering, if for some reason you're in a very, very dry climate, or your jugs are in containers and it's starting to get warm out. I've had that happen in previous years where it's gotten into May and June and they're getting warm, and so then you need to water them, right? So, and at that point, by then, you'd be opening these up anyways. I wanted to explain to you how to go ahead and make these and cut them, and maybe some of the best practices. That was my intent for this video. There are plenty of tips that I've learned along the way when it comes to winter sowing, and I find it super rewarding, and I love it that it's just so easy. Basically, Mother Nature takes care of everything. Are there times where seeds don't germinate? Absolutely. But the ease of this is so simple that it's okay if some of those seeds don't germinate. I still am getting plants that I basically had little or no effort. I needed no artificial sunlight. I needed no artificial heat lamp. I didn't have to worry about them getting too straggly or hardening them off. These all harden off naturally on their own. It's just wonderful. Now, as far as a location, obviously you're putting them outside in a sunny location is great. My yard gets super windy. When I did this the first year, they were tipping over if I didn't have them right up against the house. So now what I do is I have them up against the house. There's kind of like a little cubby kind of on the back of my house by my porch here. And so that's where I line them. And that particular area though doesn't get direct sun. They're also not in a windy area where they would tip over and cause some other issues. So for where I'm putting them now, that works for me. You put them wherever you can put them in the sun is great, but if you don't put them in the sun like me, they still work. Now, you shouldn't need to water them unless you're in a very dry climate. And in that case, you'll know if they are too dry because it'll sound like, pebbles in here. There won't be any condensation in here. But if you're in a place where you get lots of water or you get snow, they should be fine. I have not watered them in the winter at all. I have watered them when it got warmer out, getting into May and June. Now you can just sprinkle water over them, like rain would be falling down, kind of just gradually go over them. I wouldn't just pour it in because that will just wash your seeds out. You could also, if you wanted to, put this in and do it that way. But if you have a lot of jugs, that's going to take a lot of work. So it might be easier just to, put the hose and kind of broadcast that rain over it. Once it gets warmer out and the temperature gets warmer, you are going to want to open these up and let them get some air and kind of get them more acclimated. And obviously at that point, if it's warm enough and you need to water them, then go ahead and do that. And I've done that at that point as well. So another tip that I have for you is with your list. So with your list, you're going to write on here what is your number and then what that item is. So then when it comes time for you to actually take them out of here and plant them in your garden or wherever you're going to be planting them, then you can make note on your list what actually germinated and what didn't germinate. And so this list that you keep, I would keep it from the previous year as well, because you can see what was in each jug. And that way, like this, I reused this one. This was number 12, and I can look on here, oh, number 12 was beefsteak tomato. So I could use the same one. But the other reason is I made a little note of which ones germinated and which ones didn't germinate. I just did it with a simple like check, yes, it germinated, or like a circle with a line through it, like nothing came through. They could be for different reasons. And so it's nice to keep track of that, because if, say, for 3 years in a row, I tried to do a certain plant in here and it hasn't done it, it's either the seed, the actual seed packet, maybe they're old or they're not germinating. Is it the soil that I'm using? Is it the amount of moisture? Is it that I'm planting them at a wrong depth? Is it that they tipped over? Things like that. It's good to note that. And some of the ones that didn't come up last year in here, I planted directly seeded into my garden after, and those plants did come up. I didn't replant all of them, but some of them I did. And so it wasn't necessarily the seed, it could have been something else. It's good to keep notes of what you have so that you can look for, for previous years. And then if you're like, what type of cucumbers did I plant last year? Oh, I planted this, I don't winter sow everything. There are some things that I will direct sow, or like last year I planted some carrots in my jug and I decided that I am not going to do that because it was such a pain to move these little itty bitty things and get them into my garden that I wouldn't do that again. So what I am going to do this year for carrots is I'm going to direct sow them. And then there's also some of these, like the short and sweet, and some other ones that I'm going to put into a 12-inch pot container that I will have outside, and I will put some in there as well, but those aren't going to be planted and then moved. So some of the things I've decided that I'm not going to sow again. So the point is that this list is a pretty nice list. It helps you determine what did you like, what didn't you like, and you can also look at what you did last year, the type, because most people have multiple types of one plant. Okay, and so then another tip I shared in my video that I did the last time, but I'm going to share it again here, is that when you are opening these containers up in the spring or when it's getting warm out and you want to kind of acclimate your plants, or you're not quite ready to plant them in your garden, but you want to give them some airflow, you can go ahead and open this up. Now on some of them, something like this, the top is going to be really difficult to keep open. It will kind of want to spring back. So what I recommend doing is putting a rock in the top portion here, and that will keep that down so it doesn't pop up. And then obviously, at night when you want to cover them back up, you just take that rock out and put it down. So that's just another little tip. So then one of the last things I'm going to mention is you can save your containers from last year. So last year I did some sunflower seeds, and this said sunflower on it. It had number 21 on the back, so I know that's what it was. It had 21 on the back here. So I know this was a sunflower, but if I couldn't read it, if it was too faded, I would just look at my little cheat sheet here and I would see that it was sunspot sunflowers. So if I want to plant more of those this year, then I'm just going to use the same container. Now say I didn't want to plant sunflowers this year, I could still use this container and I could just take the name off and then I could make 21 something else. So every year I have a new master list. So this was my master list from last year. I have a new master list that I'm making this year. But the beauty of saving these containers is that I don't have to re-drill holes, I don't have to recut, and it's basically already done. And what I did is I ended up, taking obviously the soil and everything out. I put it right in my garden, and then I put these in big black garbage bags and I tied them off, and then I put them in my garage. I have some shelves that are hanging from the ceiling of my garage, and I put them in these plastic bags and I just put them up there with my other gardening stuff. And so they were out of sight, out of mind. And then now today that I want to do some winter sowing, I got them out. And so I'm going to be reusing these. And so it's less work. I don't have to do all of the cutting and all of the drilling. So this is a nice little tip. The majority of the work is already done for you. So that's what I would recommend to make it go a little bit smoothly for you next year. So what winter sowing questions do you have for me? Put them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And if you've winter sown before, please post any of your tips and tricks down below. I'd love to read them. I'm sure my other subscribers would love to read them as well. So go ahead and put any tips down there. If you think this video would be useful for others, please go ahead and share this video. And subscribe to my channel and hit that bell button to be notified when I release the next video in this series. So today's video was showing you how to go ahead and winter sow, and then I'm going to be doing a follow-up video showing you how these are growing and going and what worked and what didn't. But this video should give you enough information to get you started, to get these outside and ready to go on your own. And remember, it's never too late to start winter sowing. Again, it's Jody with All About the Harvest, where I teach you how to grow, use, and preserve your food. Until next time, happy winter sowing.